Hello everybody, it's Wyron here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the Central Chaos Wastes, playing as the Greenskins against the Empire. So one of the old classic matchups ripped straight from Warhammer 1. And definitely gonna be trying some different things out for once. I do think that this matchup with Empire is a relatively fair matchup. I think it's fairly even, all things considered. But I do think one of the important things for Greenskins is trying to balance between having enough width, having all the tools to deal with heavy cap. Both factions are very flexible factions. Both Empire and Greenskins are very malleable. They can bring a wide variety of builds. And so preparing for that means you kind of need a lot of different tools, in my opinion. So coming in here with Wurzag, I do think he's still a great lord. He's basically a great lord in any matchup. He's got his snare, of course, with Effigy of the Git, which is huge for a faction with such poor mobility. That is one of the defining features of Greenskins, that most of their units are pretty bad mobility-wise. Tying down heavy cav is very difficult for them, and Effigy helps compensate for that. He also does a Bonewood Staff, great mini-wah, essentially, that triggers whenever he casts a spell. Squiggly Beast for extra power reserves. He's a very solid caster as far as power reserves go. He has an AoE physical resist, though generally I don't find it to be too useful. It's only 6%. And most of your units don't have physical resist to begin with, so nothing huge. Before Schwa, I did bring Fists of Gork, as well as Here We Go and Foot of Gork, because Foot of Gork is great for wiping cab as well. One of the things I think worth keeping in mind is a lot of people don't like Here We Go and Fists of Gork combined. I think both are worth bringing. Situationally, you might find you want one or the other. Fists of Gork, of course, can help protect a unit, can keep it defended with a time melee defense buff, which is honestly for orcs is pretty hard to do otherwise. Orcs have very bad melee defense in general. And Here We Go, of course, can just compensate for your mediocre melee attack in some cases and help you overwhelm the middle flank. So it kind of depends on what you want to go for, but I think both spells are very, very nifty. Regardless, for our front line here, we are bringing 2 units of Black Orcs, so a bit of a solid core. Black Orcs, I think, are a great anchor unit in just about any Greenskin build. 2 Orc Boys on either end, and then 2 Savage Orc Big Guns on the very far flanks, basically just there in case my opponent brought heavy cap. These guys can collapse inward to help the Orc Boys, or they can go out, and if my opponent tries to come in from the flank, these guys can flex back to defend, all that sort of stuff. They're backed by 2 Nasty Skulkers, who I think are great for their smoke bomb. Nasty Skulkers are honestly one of the most cost-effective and amazing units in the game. They've got great AP, they've got a buff that boosts their damage by a huge amount, Opportunist Murder when they're winning in combat. And they're just a stellar unit in my opinion. Their only real downside is leadership, which is pretty terrible. I think it's bad even by Goblin standards, but what can you do? 3 archer units, I think 2 Savage Orcs here, as well as the Rusty Arrows. I always think it's nice to have a shooting squad against Empire, just to counter battery the Empire shooting, as well as to apply pressure to certain crucial units, the enemy cav and that sort of stuff. And also to bait enemy cav in. Broken Dust Mob, very solid anti-cav unit. These guys are, I think, I'm personally not a big fan of Orc Boar Boy Big Guns. I think Orc Boar Boy Big Guns are pretty bad. But I think these guys, though obviously still better than all the other Orc Boar units, which doesn't say much. But Orc Boar Boy Big Guns have some very solid, the Broken Dust Mob has solid armor, which I think compensates for some of their biggest disadvantages. On the peripheries, we do have the Goblin Wolf Riders and the Moon Howlers. I think you always want something to chase down Outriders. Because Outriders are a major threat to you. Both grenade launchers and vanilla variant. If you're playing as Empire in this matchup, grenade launchers or Outriders are not a bad pick in my opinion, as long as you can keep it protected from light cap. But in the case of Greenskins, Moonhowlers and Goblin Wolf Riders, of course, dirt cheap units, and the Moonhowlers actually cause fear, so hopefully looking to shut down this back line and to harass any Outriders had there been any. For my opponent, he decided to go with a little bit of an oddball build, definitely looking for the Lord Snipes. He did bring Balthazar here with Final Transmutation, as well as a Shaman of Beasts, or not Shaman of Beasts. I was about to call him Bray Shaman. It's an Amber Wizard. Good lord. But he's got Flock of Doom and Pan's Impenetrable Belt. Interesting choice on Pan's Impenetrable Belt. I'm not entirely sure what the goal there is. It's a spell I don't see used very often, but I definitely think it can be pretty potent. That physical resist for faction with very little physical magical damage is definitely nifty. Or when faced against a faction with little magical damage. A Witch Hunter, always a solid pick, backed by a mix of Greatswords and Flagellants in the front line. Personally, I don't think you need this any Flagellants. The problem with the Greenskins right now is that if you try to match them in the front line, you're going to get wad, and your front line's going to disintegrate, and you're going to lose the game very, very quickly. You need to, in my opinion, stagger out the front line. My opponent's kind of done that here. He's got plenty of reserves. He's got his Sigmar Sons. He's got his Spearmen. He's got more Spearmen here with shields. He's got some Empire Knights here. So definitely a bit of reserves, but definitely going very heavy on the front line without really, in my opinion, the buffs to make it happen. But nonetheless, we will see how things break down in just a little bit. Warrior does have a Hellblaster Volley Gun, as well as a Great Cannon, which I'm doing my very best to shut down with my Goblin Wolf Riders. We did actually get the crew to dismount the Hellblaster, which is a little bit of a win, and we are trying to sort of thread around with the Moonhowlers. I'm trying to figure out a way to get in and holding back, because obviously I'm not about to charge into a bunch of spears with Empire Knights on the flank. That would be a total waste, and we wouldn't get a shutdown that we want. Nonetheless, my opponent here is peppering away at the Black Orcs, and I'm trying to get my advantageous matchups, and I'm trying to make sure my opponent has committed to the fight. Now, one of the things to keep in mind here, you can see my opponent hit me with Final Transmutation on Warsack. This is going to do an immense amount of damage. Final Transmutation is brutal against orcs. If you're trying to do lore sniping builds, honestly, if you're trying to prematurely snipe your opponent's lord before he gets a wall off, honestly, Balthazar's a way to do it. But you can see I'm running away. I'm trying to stay away from my own units. One of the interesting things, Final Transmutation moves around much like a buff spell. It moves around with your lord, or with the unit that's been hit, and it applies to new units as you move towards them. So never move a unit that's been hit by Final Transmutation in next to your own units if you can avoid it. Try to separate as quickly as possible, or Final Transmutation will get more value, way more value than you want. Nonetheless, now that the fight has actually broken down, we are going to pop our wall. These nasty Skulkers unfortunately routing because I accidentally pushed them into flagellants. You can see a bit of a micro lapse because I was focused on the backline and elsewhere. So the archers got into the fight, and definitely not great, but you can see immediately the wall's going to start turning this into a massacre. Black Orcs on the charge, crushing these great swords. Here in the pits, you can see these flagellants collapsing very, very quickly. And Warsack now, with the Final Transmutation having used up, Warsack can charge in and start doing some damage. We do use a Brain Burster to get some additional boost, and you can see it does provide that plus 13 melee attack, which puts, for example, Orc Boys, who are not a very high melee attack unit, up to 42 melee attack, which is very, very solid. You can see as we throw Warsack in here and against the Great Swords, that's basically an optimal situation for him. You don't want to put him against units that can actually threaten him effectively. Over on the flank, the Broken Tusk Mob kind of beating down the Empire Knights, though the Empire Knights actually got the charge off, so this is going to be a bit of an inconvenient fight. But in the meantime, the Moonhowlers do shut down the artillery pieces, which is absolutely critical. My opponent no longer has artillery, which also reduces the chances of lord sniping. Over here, you can see the archers just pounding away at the Empire Knights. Personally, I think if you're going for cav-heavy builds, and I do think cav-heavy builds are the way to go against the Greenskins, so don't get me wrong here, but I think Empire Knights are not the way to go. Their weapon strength is very low, their charge bonus is not very good, and their weapon melee attack and defense is very, very poor as well. In my opinion, the way to go is with Reiksguard or Knights of the Blazing Sun. Those are, in my opinion, your best options. Knights of the Blazing Sun give you a little bit of edge and mobility. If you're more confident with your cycle charging, they're definitely good. Reiksguard, if you're a little less confident with your cycle charging, if you want to grind out a little bit, which you might need to against Boar Boys, I think Reiksguard is not a bad choice. I think Demigryphs are not really worth it because they're just overkill in this matchup. Though, if someone has had alternate experiences, be sure to let me know. I'd honestly love to know if someone's had great success with Demis in this matchup. Either Halberds or the vanilla variant. Regardless, the Black Orcs do kind of pile through here with the help of the archers, and you can see we're trying to pull our nasty Skulkers back into the fight. Here in the pits, the Savage Orc Big Guns are going to dumpster the Flagellants. A bit of an optimal matchup, almost for both units. Flagellants designed to kill squishy infantry, Savage Orcs being a pretty squishy infantry, but with very high HP, and they themselves, of course, also designed to kill Flagellants. Or squishy units. You can see in the pits, though, as the Great Swords start buckling, my opponent's line is definitely going to start struggling. It's definitely going to be a bit of an issue. The Moonhowlers here pulling away from the spears. We don't want them engaging. They don't have very good stats. And we are going to try to actually rout the Empire Knights, which definitely not going to happen. But, you know, we can try. If you get a rear charge, one of the interesting things to keep in mind is if you get a rear charge followed up with a little bit of damage on the charge, you can sometimes rout a much more powerful unit if your opponent isn't paying attention. So definitely something to keep in mind. My opponent here does notice he's going to get his charge off, which is going to immediately reset his leadership or fix his leadership problems. And Moonhowlers, with Nasty Skulkers not doing very much here, are not going to be able to do much. So what we do is we're going to pull the Moonhowlers away and go chase the Great Swords off. In the meantime, and you can see with the smoke bomb, these guys are going to be snared and prevented from helping. In the meantime, the archers working on the spearmen and shields because the front line is basically foregone conclusion. And I kept Warsack away, and realizing that if I kept Warsack close, my opponent could potentially get another Final Transmutation, which is definitely not what we want. I pulled Warsack away, and I'm kind of hiding him in the back right now, waiting for spells to cool down. Going to help on sort of the periphery without risking myself against Balthazar, because the second Final Transmutation with maybe a hit or charge from Balthazar at this point could be endgame for me, and I definitely don't want that to happen. Despite the fact that the match is very much swinging in my favor, my opponent can still make a comeback, and it's definitely not what we want. In the meantime, you can see the Black Orcs here finally crumping through the Flagellants. Flagellants really not standing a chance against the Orc Boys and the Black Orc mob here. And we do use the Broken Tusk Mob to run down the Great Swords, because the Great Swords are really the most threatening unit here. Mass archery fire is going to break the spearman, which is pretty nifty. You can see here my opponent gets a little greedy, really desperate to shut down the shooting, so we're going to hit him with an effigy of the Git. And you can see Balthazar only has 2,400 HP, and he's only got 38 melee defense. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to hit these Savage Orc boys with Fists of Gork. Just going to buff their melee attack through the roof, and you can see Balthazar just going down like a 9-pin. Wartsack dives in, and he's not having a good time. So definitely some rough stuff for poor Balthazar here. One of those things to keep in mind is Savage Orc boys, or Arab boys in general, are very potent melee combatants, all things considered. And you can see here they're going to be slugging out with these knights. You can see that guy just smacking them with his bone axe. They're actually killing some of them. They actually bring multiple knights down, so be wary of that if you're trying to use cav against them. You want to cycle charge them very heavily. You don't want to get bogged down. In protracted melee, Savage Orcs, Arab boys can often do okay. And yeah, be careful about getting your lords in there, especially when the word stacks around with an effigy to get. This was actually the first effigy I used this game, because I hadn't used it up to that point. Here in the pits, in the meantime, Sigmar's Sun slowly but surely getting shipped away out. We do use another Brain Burst to help our Black Orc buddies over here. You can see the Black Orcs, despite looking very crippled and beat up right now, are still sitting on several models. Flank charge from the Broken Tusk mob is going to wrap up this unit of spears. And with that, my opponent's army is essentially reduced to insignificance. You can see the Witch Hunter here being chased off by the nasty Skulkers. They're probably going to break, but it doesn't really matter. We zoned them out. And the Moon Howlers here chasing after Balthazar, who they should be able to shut down. They have very low HP. The Wolf Riders don't have very good stats in general, even the roided up ones like this. But the hope, of course, being that we can shut down good old Balthazar. So you can see my opponent's army at this point just breaking to army losses. He is going to GG out before the Sigmar Suns do shatter. Or do get destroyed, but good game. So, a few little tidbits here. Don't try to match Greenskins in the frontline fight. Unless WoW gets changed or nerfed or something like that, trying to match Greenskins in a 1v1 honest-to-goodness frontline duel is a disaster waiting to happen. While procs, you're going to take immense losses on your front line. You're not going to be able to bail out. You're going to lose. You need to stagger out the engagement somehow. Generally, I think staggering spears and shooting is a good way to do it. I think... if some of you have seen my Empire builds, which rely basically very heavy on heavy mobs of heavy cav backed by Pistoliers and say terror causing unit like Boris, that is in my opinion a very good way to do things. The one thing you just do not want to be doing is trying to engage the Greenskins in a straight up fight. And my opponent kind of tried to do that here. It's important to keep in mind this is not a cheap front line. 2 greatswords and 4 flagellants is 2,400, double 900, so it's 4,200 on the front line. Honestly, not much cheaper than my front line. It certainly was cheaper, but not really enough. And otherwise, I would have swapped the units out. Put the Sigmar Suns and the Spearmen in the front, let them soak up the charge, maybe force my wall out, and then push in with these heavier units. As it stands, the Orc boys, they're 900, 2,700. We paid about 5k for our front line here with the Black Orcs. So... certainly it's more expensive than what Empire's doing, but we're not over-investing in the front line, and we're able to just overwhelm them very, very quickly. They're not getting their money's worth in the front line fight because of WoW. They're just crumpling way too fast. And my opponent didn't have the money to bring the shooting to really put me down. He did bring Hellblasters, he did bring Ray Cannons, and you can see they racked up quite a few kills, but really not enough to cut the mustard there. The Wolf Riders just shut them down hard. My opponent was, due to the fact that the front line collapsed so quickly, my opponent was forced to pull his Spearmen and those units forward to try to defend, and that ended up exposing the artillery. Empire Knights, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of them in this matchup. I think if you're trying to use cavalry, and I think you should use cavalry, you've got alternate options. Use Reichsguard, use Knights of the Blazing Sun. Now, one of the caveats as far as making Lord Sniping happen, you can make Lord Sniping happen as Greenskins, but you don't want to be doing it with Witch Hunter. Witch Hunter has a very short range. Yeah, sure, he's a great sniping unit if your opponent is willing to commit, but a lot of Greenskin players are savvy. They're not going to YOLO in with their Lord. Usually they bring a Casterler anyway, so it's going to be a Wurtzag, it's going to be Azag. There's sometimes, very rarely, you'll see someone like a Goblin Great Shaman if someone's trying to go very cheap on the Head Lord in the Lord department, but regardless, your Witch Hunter is against the savvy Greenskin player is never going to be in a position to get a accusation off, or very rarely is going to get into that position. In that game, Wurtzag basically just went to the opposite flank from my opponent's Witch Hunter, and my opponent's Witch Hunter got no value in that sense. He got a bunch of kills, but honestly, I don't care too much about units like Wolf Riders and Skulkers that do sniping. Balthazar Gelt, especially mounted on a Pegasus over Swift, what is he called? Quicksilver. great choice with Final Transmutation. Amber Wizards with Amber Spears. Fire Wizards or Bright Wizards with Fireballs. I'm not entirely sure how Shims were engaged, but either way, those are your better Lord sniping options if you're trying to snipe out an enemy Lord. Otherwise, if you're feeling very cheeky and you know you can pull it off, sometimes you can, depending on your opponent's comp. You can try to do a melee snipe. Bring a Lord on a Griffin, bring, say, Carl or Balthazar, but I would not usually recommend that. Or not Balthazar, Boris. I don't think that's going to work out most of the time, but you can give it a try. You can always see if it works. But you definitely, Lord sniping is an option. You can try to zone them out with cannons. If you can chip away at them, oftentimes if you can set a Greenskin player low enough in HP, he's going to become very hesitant to dive in. Now, I do understand this is a bit of a gimmicky strat. It's all about Lord sniping, but you know what? It's a legitimate strat, and it's one of the ways to counteract WoW. So do keep that in mind. Those are my two recommendations: either go cav heavy or go Lord sniping. Nonetheless, good game to my opponent, Bob Rooney here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative. Hope you found it entertaining. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe below if you've not already. If you have any comments, any criticism, as usual, be sure to share them, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I'm able. As usual, guys, I thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.